So I'm here, I'm gonna interview him about the book. I am his son, but I still don't know that much about the book yet. I was thinking, since I'm a college student, what do you think about this book would entice readers that are either older or my generation, or what's gonna keep other people intrigued?
That's a good question. So the main thing I would say is that at the center of the story, this band, and I always put it in quotes because these characters didn't want to be a band. In fact, they're all really reluctant to even do this. There's 3 members who are all in their late 60s, early 70s, and they're different ethnicities, and they're the kind of people that actually had lived in this neighborhood for decades, but because of the way this community was for a long time, they never would have actually crossed paths. Because if you're black, white, Hispanic, you kind of, the way that this culture was, you sort of kept to yourself for a long time. But now when young people started to move here, really what happened was in the late 90s when tornadoes came and tore the snot out of this exact area where we are, a lot of artists like you, Jesse here is an art student right now at Tennessee Tech. A lot of artists moved in and they started to change the community. It was really, really cheap to live here. And so what happens in the story is these 2 college students who are musicians kind of force their neighbor, this old man who's been playing guitar, to play music with them. And then everything starts to happen. This band is really not a band. It's just people playing music in a garage in a house a few blocks away. Everything else happens accidentally after that. So I hope that young people would find this interesting, because I think that the question is, what are we really looking for in music? Is it just something to listen to while we're staying in the house, that kind of thing? And that's cool, I like doing that too. Or is there something deeper going on in music? And I think that people your generation are missing out sometimes on some of the deeper things. And I also think that some of the folks that have more story and more stuff invested in them because they've got more miles on them, they don't have opportunities to actually explore that. And so when you put those things together, something kind of explosive happens.
So I know you've written a couple other books that are all nonfiction. So how and why, or I guess what better, inspired you to write your first fictional story and set it here? What was the catalyst for that?
Well, I was on a backpacking trip with your oldest brother, Jordan, and a bunch of other people from our home group 11 or 12 years ago. And a lot of these ideas had been percolating in my head. I've worked in the music business my whole life, and I've been a musician. And I kind of always wondered, what is it we really want out of music? And then we were on this backpacking trip, and one night we'd gotten to the place where we were going to camp, and then we were done. Like the work for the day was finished, and there's nothing to do. There's no phones. There's no, we had built this kind of stone table thing when people were napping, and I just don't sit still. My brain keeps going, and so I kind of started thinking. I was working on the Jesus Bread and Chocolate book, and that's not fiction. But I started to think, well, what if the same ideas from that book were put into story form? Like the kind of stories I'd tell you guys when you were kids, but for adults. And so that night around the fire, I started to just do storytelling, like what I imagined people did 10,000 years ago. And then what really happened was I had to drive the car. The next day when we hiked down the mountain and loaded up the car, I was super tired. Everybody was, but I had to drive whatever it was, 3 hours home. So to keep myself awake, I started telling this story to our friends Zach, Josh, and Jordan, I think were the ones in the car. And talking kept me awake, but they got really interested in these characters. And one of them, I think it was Zach, was like, you've got to write this. And so the next day I just started writing out who these characters were and the essence of this thing. And that just, whenever I had time, even when I was finishing Jesus Bread and Chocolate, I'd go on these writing retreats and I'd work until I could not work anymore on that book. And then my brain just wouldn't stop. So I'd pick up this book and I'd write fiction, but I'd never done that before. So it was hard.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess last question from this book, what do you want readers to glean from it? What do you think or the main overarching theme or the vibes, or what do you think people are going to get from this book? How is it going to make people feel?
Well, I hope it makes them feel. One of my favorite compliments I've gotten so far is from one of my sort of adopted cousins, the Vasquez's from Mexico, right? So Elizabeth read the book, and there's a particular scene that I described, and Elizabeth is not one that's going to be prone to just say nice things. She was reading it, and I asked her to be critical, and I asked her to give me feedback. And she did, and she actually gave me really good advice, especially on the elements of the story that deal with Mexico and Mexican culture. We lived, when you were born, you were born on the east side of Aurora, Illinois. You don't remember it much, but there's a lot in this book that has to do with Hispanic culture. And I want to make sure I got that right.
Yeah.
And there's a particular part of the story where people are sitting at a table, and I won't go into much detail, but she gave me really good feedback on that. But at the end she said, oh, I really wanted to be at that table. And that just made me so excited, because that's what I want. Is I want people to realize there's more to music than just entertainment, and there's more to music than just a product we buy. It's about community. Everything is about, it's all about the people in our lives. And so what I'm hoping is that people find it fun, and they want to keep turning the pages, and they want to know what happens to these people, because otherwise you're not doing your job as an author. But there's a central problem at the very first page. The very first page is a problem. These people have found themselves in a situation they don't know if they should just abandon ship or what. And then the rest of the story is them trying to figure out what to do. I kind of want everybody to ask to kind of put themselves in the position of that problem. And the other thing is the music is fun. I mean, I mentioned music by Los Lobos and the Grateful Dead and Bill Withers and all this, and I'm trying to kind of show people that gospel music and Tejano music and psychedelic music and Americana music, that the threads are a lot more similar than they are now. So I'm hoping people will listen to stretch their musical boundaries and stuff, especially young people. I know you do this all the time, but a lot of your friends probably don't, right?
Yeah.
Most of your friends probably listen to one style of music or maybe two.
Yeah.
Well, if they listen to the playlist and they, then I think they might go, oh man, this make me feel something. And that's what I'm hoping that they'll do. Because then it might make them want to be at that table a little bit more. And Grandma Nikki, my grandma, his great grandma, when she read it, there's a particular scene where a priest is having a beer with one of the guys in the band, and she's like, oh, John would know this priest. I want to meet this priest. I want to talk to this priest. And she had forgotten that this is fiction. And so she told your grandma, my mom, I wonder if he could introduce me to this priest. And Mom's like, you realize that he made this up? She's like, well, he kind of is this priest. It was like when you forget that this is fiction and you just get into the story, and then you start to go, what could I do to make my life like that? And that's really the invitation, is to say, can we just jam? Can we make our lives more like this? Because I think we can.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to go back to what you said about community and turn it to you guys. This thing is going to be awesome. I'm super stoked for it to come out, but we definitely need as much help as we can. So give what you can. If you can't give anything, share, share, share. The bigger the community we can build around this thing, the more likely we are to be able to get it out to you sooner. So thanks for watching. Thank you for writing this book. Thanks for making me. I'm super stoked to read this thing. I hope you guys are too.
Thanks, everybody.